Get ready, because here's your host, Tyson Mutrux.
Welcome to today's Guild Live show. I've got a really good one for you today. Quick heads up before I get into the show. We are going to have tickets on sale until tomorrow at midnight. So tomorrow at midnight is when the tickets go on. The prices go up, just so you know. So ticket prices go up tomorrow at midnight by $500 from the general admission tickets. So make sure you go to maxlawcon.com today to make sure you get them, because if you don't get them by tomorrow at midnight, and it, just so you know, if you are listening to this or watching this on Saturday, that the time has already expired. So just so you know, this is for people that are watching this live. If you're watching this live, tickets they go up by $500 tomorrow at midnight, maxlawcon.com. If you are watching this a little bit late, it's okay. You can still get your tickets to MaxLawCon. They're just going to be a little bit more expensive. So let's get on to the show. So I've got a really interesting one, because we're going to be talking about a Zoom info survey that has some really interesting marketing data in it, and then something about lean startups. We're going to talk about that. Third gen AI coding, a turnover risk that you might be overlooking, and TikTok substitute, which is this is an interesting one of all of them. I think this is maybe the most interesting one for me. It's because I think a lot of people thought, maybe including myself, that TikTok might be going away, and I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it's going to be sticking around for a lot of reasons. But let's get going into today's show. First up is the Zoom Info State of the AI and Sales Marketing 2025 survey. And in that, it reveals some pretty fascinating insights. It's the first number I want to talk about. It's that about half of sales and marketing professionals now regularly use AI, which I would say is not super surprising. But so specifically, 20% use it daily, 29% use it weekly, and here's where it gets really interesting. So what does this mean practically? Users reported an impressive 47% boost in productivity, and they save about 12 hours per week by automating routine tasks. Okay, I don't think there's any super big surprise there. Here's where it gets really interesting. So more importantly, AI users are seeing tangible revenue impacts: 28% shorter deal cycles, 70% larger deals, and a remarkable 76% higher win rate. So those numbers are crazy. I'm going to read those again. So it takes about a third of the less time to close a deal. The deals are 70% larger. It's almost double. Think about that. That's almost double. And then you've got their win rate has increased by 76%. That's almost double. That's really incredible. Interestingly, younger professionals under 35 are leading AI adoption, with sectors like tech and telecom leading the charge. Regulated industries like finance and government are slower adopters due to governance and data quality hurdles. Yet obstacles remain. Major barriers include concerns about data accuracy, lack of skilled personnel, integration issues, cultural resistance, and budget constraints. Poor data quality alone can erode up to 25% of the revenue potential. So that's interesting. So if you have poor data, it's that old saying, garbage in, garbage out. Same thing with that. So if you put in garbage data, it's gonna definitely ruin your revenue potential. The survey, it also recommends some pretty clear strategies. So prioritize data quality, invest in regular team training, introduce AI incrementally. So start with frontline contributors, and expand upward to make sure that there's a smoother transition, and that way you can maximize your results. So a- another part of this that they predict in this, at least, is that the early adopters, they are going to be poised. I know that's why I've been talking about this on the show so much, is that the early adopters, they're going to be poised to significantly outperform competitors that are lagging behind. So if you have not yet dipped your toe in the water of I highly encourage you to do so, because it's detrimental at this point, to not get started with AI. It is just going to be detrimental to your firm. I promise you that right now. I can't stress that part enough. I just can't. So, all right, let's get into our next story, which has to do with lean startups. And this is an interesting story because it has to do with a company called Jolie. And there really is this trend that has been, I'd say, reshaping businesses. And I think many of you that are listening to the podcast, because just who you are, because you listen to Maxim Lawyer, and you are the type of business owner that just wants to improve, you probably have heard of lean startups. You probably have learned, or at least heard of that term. And what you're starting to see in many industries is that you have these teams that are very lean, that are generating enormous revenues with very minimal staff. And so this company Jolie, what's interesting is that they're achieving $50 million in revenues with just 5 employees. Uh, I mean, think about that. That's 10 million per employee. You're talking about, we've talked about revenue per employee in the past. That's incredible revenue employee. And one of the major ways that they're able to do it is through automation, AI integrations, and then also they're very strategic about their outsourcing. And what they've really done is they've embraced technology. So by embracing technology and external talent, I guess is what I'll call it, they're able to maximize efficiency. They're able to reduce their overhead, and which is also part of this is really incredible too. But it allows them to scale dramatically. So they're able to have these massive revenues with lower overhead, and that's, I mean, you're talking about massive profits. So if you could think about this, if you could just imagine applying these same principles to your law firm, I mean, I'm guessing that automation. Think about just using automation to streamline your case management, maybe your billing. Maybe AI could handle your routine research, or document drafting. You could outsource roles, kind of like bookkeeping. A lot of people have been doing that. You've been hearing more about CMO, so marketing, doing things like that could free up your internal resources to focus on those high value tasks. Now, I will say, be very careful about it, because I hear a lot of people about hiring CMOs and COOs and all that. It's worth it if you're getting that full value out of it, because you could spend a lot of money on those types of people and not get a lot for them. Sometimes it's better off just to hire someone that can um, do social media posts for you than it is to hire a CMO. So be very, very strategic about that. You could do the opposite. You could potentially do the opposite in this situation. There are some people I would recommend that have CMO services, that I could mention later on, but um, not all CMOs are created equally. I'll leave that there. But so back to the lean approach, it's just incredible because what you can do is you're able to reduce costs, but it's not just all about that. It's really about fundamentally rethinking how the business operates, and it really forces you to step back and think, what do we need? What do we not need? What what is a luxury? What's not a luxury? What are things that we absolutely have to have no matter what? Really comes down to efficiency and scalability, but with that, you don't really need a high headcount, which uh, you hear a lot of people talk about. And I always call it an ego number, the number of employees they have. That doesn't mean that you've got a good business. That might mean that you have a really bloated business. That might be what that means. So don't just think because you got a big team that you got a great team. Doesn't mean that. The what this requires is it really demands of you strategic use of technology and resources. And it also part of the resources is people, right? You have to use people very strategically. So you have to think lean, you have to think smart, and really, if you can do that, if you can really leverage this, you're gonna be able to watch your firm thrive. All right, let's get into our third story today, and that is third gen AI coding tools. And this is an article. It's called "Third Gen AI Coding Tools Go Mainstream." So we're going to discuss. So we'll discuss third gen AI coding, and what they're really doing is they're transforming technology development. So platforms like Anthropic's Claude Code, GitHub's Copilot, and then you also have, if you've heard of Cursor, there's also something called Bolt.new. Things like that are defining these third gen AIs, I guess. They're really redefining coding workflows. Although I did see an interesting study recently that it was slowing down software engineers by 19%. But we're going to set that aside for a second. But these platforms really are they're redefining coding and the way it works, and they're giving everyone access to coding is what it's doing. But it's really redefining the way the workflows work. By what they do is they integrate AI into the DevOps processes. And so these tools, what they'll do is they'll automate end-to-end coding tasks, and which is supposed to substantially boost productivity, which then would speed up your innovation. So we're going to be announcing something that we've actually launched it into the guild, into beta. We'll announce it to everyone pretty soon. And we were able to move pretty quickly because of AI. And so it does allow you to boost productivity, but there were definitely some hiccups, and what I'll do, and I'll probably do a later show on some of the hiccups that we had with it, because it's not all just smooth sailing. There are some downsides of all this, but it is really it is something that the people that don't know how to code, like myself, it gives people like us access to the AI gives us access to be able to take our ideas and implement them pretty quickly. And so I think that part's pretty cool. There really is more of the story though. So Anthropic's Claude Opus 4, it recently faced a pretty big controversy when the internal task revealed very concerning ethical challenges, to put it lightly. It allegedly threatened an engineer during testing, which it's a really fascinating story, and it really highlights the really critical and safety questions that are surrounding advanced AI tools. There's this massive promise of productivity that must be, but you got to really balance that against like really stringent oversight. And I mean, we are, as lawyers, we have ethical guidelines that we have to stick to. That's why you'll hear the term quite a bit, person in the loop, and you need to put a person in the loop quite a bit, especially in the early testing phases of when you're using AI and AI agents. That way, you're testing the outputs to make sure that you're not doing anything or going outside the ethical guidelines. Like, for example, if you're producing any content, you want to make sure that, like, for example, like in most states, you can't use the word expert. You can't call yourself an expert, right? So you can't be producing blog posts that are calling you an expert. You got to be very, very careful about that. That's just one tiny, tiny example. It could go way more off the rails. You just got to be very, very careful about it. So, and be thinking about, like, what does this really mean for your law firm, right? AI technology can vastly enhance your productivity, but careful implementation and really safety protocols are crucial. They have to be. Without them, you're really you're really risking a lot. So you got to make sure your team fully understands AI's capabilities and its limitations. So you have to make sure that not only are informed, but your team is informed. And so you have to adopt these tools really thoughtfully and manage your risk proactively. That way you can reap the AI's substantial benefits, but also doing it safely. So you gotta be very, very careful. So um, it's going to this one's sort of like the good, the bad, where you've got these great tools like GitHub's Copilot. You got Claude Code that announced or that was launched pretty recently. You got Cursor, all that. These are awesome tools that allow you to do a lot of things very quickly, but there are some risks. So you have to be really, really careful with it. All right, let's get into our fourth story. And this has to do with turnover and how remote work policies and turnover risk. So that's what we're talking about. So our next story, it tackles an issue that directly impacts your talent management, and that's remote work policies. So there's a recent Fast Company survey that revealed a pretty striking statistic that 40% of employees would seriously consider leaving their jobs if remote or hybrid work options were removed. And so this isn't some hypothetical risk. It's a real and immediate risk. You see this affecting many big companies, and if it's affecting big companies, you better believe it's gonna affect law firms. So for small businesses and small law firms, enforcing a strict return to office policy could lead to a pretty significant talent drain. So if any of you are considering that, just know, and I do think that the opposite is true. So if you decide, okay, we're going to go from in office to remote, you might want to have a discussion with your team beforehand because that's a pretty drastic change. And some people want to be in the office, right? Some people want to have the option to do either, and some people don't want to go in the office. You have to make sure um, you consider all of the alternatives and what your team wants. But recruitment and training, they're very costly. And so losing experienced staff, as many of you know, it can really damage productivity and morale. So flexibility isn't just a perk anymore. It's a pretty competitive necessity for many, many firms. I'm not saying that you have to have it, but it's something that you could be losing out on some really good talent by not having that as an option. So really consider the balance your firm strikes between that remote and in-office work, and ask the question: can you afford to lose your talent over rigid policies if you are forcing people to come in the office or you're pushing them out of the office? Either way, you have to really, really consider those, the positives and the negatives. Maintaining that flexible approach, I think, might be your best strategy to make sure that you're able to retain valuable employees and attract that top talent. I know that what we were able to do is when we started to look outside of our immediate geographic area and allow for um, the possibility of hiring remotely in other states, it really opened up our talent pool. And it's allowed us to do way better work than had we just stuck to our geographic areas in the state of Missouri. It really did allow us to open up our talent pool. So for those of you that are just in office, I just encourage you to look into the possibility of either hybrid work or remote work. But um, I would, at least if I were you, embrace more of a hybrid work environment. But make sure either way, no matter what you do, clearly communicate your expectations, remain adaptable to evolving employee preferences. Because I really do think that the future of your firm's talent retention really is going to depend on it. Is your ability to evolve, because this is something that's been shifting. If you think about just 20 years ago, this wasn't I mean, it was a thing, but it was very, very few people did it. So I highly encourage you, if you're not um, remote at all, to look into it at least. But all right, let's get into our last story, and this is this one is about TikTok. And on this one, marketers warn no substitute for TikTok. That is that's what I was talking about, how I thought TikTok would kind of start to go away, but I mean the marketers, they are convinced that there really is no substitute. So despite ongoing uncertainties, which is kind of incredible around us, because you got this massive uncertainty around the regulatory future, although it's gotten quiet a little bit, but marketers are overwhelmingly insisting that there's no comparable substitute. And the reason why is because TikTok, it uniquely excels at driving demand generation, brand visibility, and audience engagement. And that's according to this article. Its authenticity resonates deeply with users, while its highly sophisticated algorithms precisely target audiences, boosting reach and engagement. For law firms, TikTok can demystify complex legal topics, humanize your practice, and significantly expand your client base. Here's what's kind of interesting is I felt like for a while we were seeing a new social media channel about once a week, almost like you were seeing AI now. And I have noticed that it's the dust has kind of settled with different social media channels, and you're not really seeing many pop up anymore. That is kind of an interesting thing, and a big part of this might be the fact that there is less competition, because less are popping out. So that's kind of an interesting thing, and I do wonder if that's going to change a little bit with vibe coding. If any of you have heard of that, that's a little bit what I was talking about with the third generation AI, but a little bit different. But so it is kind of an interesting thing. But I do think with for like law firms, TikTok, it can demystify complex legal topics for people. Like that you can make it very interesting. It allows you to humanize your practice, which is great. And because of that, you can significantly expand your client base. I have been hearing the phrase quite a bit recently, TikTok lawyers, and not necessarily in the nicest way. And I think that that more refers to the people that are, you know, they're the jack of all trades kind of a TikTok lawyer. And they do get a lot of followers. I question whether or not that's effective at driving clients. But if you do it things like ways like Jimmy hacking, the way he does it, he does a great job of leveraging TikTok, where it's all about immigration law, and he hammers it over and over and over all day. That is, but it's a part of his overall marketing scheme, right? It's not just it's not he doesn't just randomly post things. So as long as it's part of your strategic plan, I'm all for it. Um, I would say that I would say that the heated caution is necessary, just because there is TikTok does have an uncertain regulatory landscape, which can pose some risks. So think about doing all that video content, doing all the work to produce those videos, and then all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. That is, I mean, we saw it for what, 3 or 4 hours, um, 6 months ago. we we saw we saw it happen. So it has happened. People were freaking out, and um, I mean, people were like losing their minds. And so it could happen. So you have to be very, very careful about that. And um, it's got to be part of your strategic plan. You got to also part of the plan. You got to understand that you might lose it all. That is a complete possibility. But um, you just have to evaluate your target demographic. You have to assess the potential benefits versus the risks, and really just create a clear contingency plan, should they, face those restrictions. But yeah, I mean, TikTok, it does offer exceptional marketing potential. It really does. There are notable uncertainties with it, but just approach it strategically, measure rigorously when it comes to whether or not it's working. Because the thing I see quite a bit is people producing a bunch of content and it's leading to zero clients. They might get some followers from it. They might get some, they might go viral with some videos, but it's not leading to clients. You have to make sure you tie it into a marketing plan, right? Where you've got some sort of funnel that it's leading them down the path to clients. So don't just record videos and just, cross your fingers, hope that something's going to happen. It has to be part of a plan. So make sure you do that. And that's where maybe some sort of virtual CMO might work out. Who knows? But um, your firm's market, I think a lot of people think that you just do certain things and money happens, cases happen, but your firm's marketing success really does depend on smart choices, and especially in this rapidly changing digital landscape. So, all right. That does conclude today's show, though. And so just a quick recap. AI revolutionizing sales and marketing. Just as a reminder, act now or risk falling behind. Lean models challenge traditional norms, emphasizing efficiency over headcount. AI coding tools offer great potential, but require careful insight. Flexible remote work policies are essential for retaining top talent, and TikTok remains irreplaceable in digital marketing. Navigate its uncertainties wisely. But thank you for joining us today. Make sure that if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you are listening to this on the podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button. It does help us. It helps us with the algorithm and spreading the love all over the world, really, because we've got listeners all over the world, which is pretty cool. Also, if I'm going to ask this, if you get any value from these episodes, I would ask that you please give us a 5-star review. Same thing. It helps with the algorithm, helps spread the love. That way we can help as many law firm owners as possible. And as a reminder, make sure maxlawcon.com. Ticket sales go up tomorrow by $500. So make sure that you get your tickets. But July 31st at midnight, you'll turn into a pumpkin. Okay, so make sure you get your tickets now. And again, if you're watching this or listening to this on Saturday, sorry, it's too late, but you can still get tickets to MaxLawCon. They will not be at that reduced rate. So, all right, everybody, have a wonderful week. We'll see you.
Our next mastermind in New York City is sold out. But don't worry, there's still time to get your tickets to the mastermind and Max LawCon in Nashville in October. Max LawCon is 2 days of immersive learning, powerful insights, and meaningful connections, all designed to provide actionable strategies you'll take back to your firm and implement right away. No fluff, just real talk and tangible takeaways you can implement immediately. Go to maxlawevents.com for more details.
I deal with life different, make that limit squeeze. Went off for my style and identity.